The entire enterprise technology space is moving to the cloud, but the cloud isn't all it's cracked up to be. There's a definite dark side to cloud computing, and that's what I want to talk about here today. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent tech agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. And as I mentioned at the top of the video, the entire industry is moving to cloud software. Whether it's software as a service or private cloud or some sort of public cloud solution, most big ERP, CRM, human capital management, and other enterprise technology providers are moving their solutions to the cloud. And most organizations are starting to do some sort of journey to the cloud if they haven't already gotten all the way there. But what a lot of organizations don't understand is there is a lot of merit to cloud solutions, but there's also a dark side. The cloud solutions aren't the answer for everything, and they solve a lot of problems, but they also create a lot of risks and limitations. And it's really important to understand what those limitations are so that you can plan accordingly and mitigate your risk accordingly. And that's what I want to dive into here today. If you're looking for more trends like this in the digital transformation industry, I encourage you to read our annual digital transformation report. It contains a number of trends and industry reviews and software reviews and rankings. If you'd like to read that, you can scan the QR code right here or go to the links below. One of the advantages of cloud software is that it provides a certain amount of standardization and common sets of business processes. It creates automatic upgrades and other features that are delivered without you having to deliver those yourself or to actually install any of the updates. And that can be a good thing for a lot of organizations, but it also creates a certain amount of inflexibility because now it's harder to change the software to get it to do what you might want it to do if the standard way of operating the software doesn't fit your needs. And this is especially true for public cloud or multi-tenant software as a service, which means multiple organizations are using the same version of that software with their own data isolated for their own use and confidentiality and privacy, but it's the same functionality, the same exact functionality you're using across multiple organizations. So for that reason, that scale is a good thing because it allows cloud providers to provide standard processes at scale. But on the flip side, it makes it harder to go in and actually change the software. When you compare that to the old on-premise model, on-premise software, you could do whatever you wanted with it. If you wanted to go in and change the code or do a bunch of integration or break the system, you could do that. But now with cloud software, the good news and the bad news is you can't do that. On one hand, you can't break it. It's harder to break it the way that a lot of organizations would with on-premise software. But on the flip side, you also can't have as much flexibility to automate some of those competitive advantages or unique business processes that you once had. Now, having said all this, the whole emergence of low-code, no-code, and flexible configuration tools has made this statement a little less true, but it's still largely true that full customization that you could do with on-premise systems is a lot more flexible than what you're getting today with modern cloud solutions, especially software as a service. So going into these projects, it's really important to understand where the gaps are between what the software can do off the shelf and what it is you need, and you need to have a plan for what you're going to do to address those gaps. Any system you go to deploy is going to have limitations to what you want it to do. The key is how do you manage those risks and how do you address them? Do you decide to change your processes to fit the software? Do you go find a third-party bolt-on? There's a lot of different ways that you could do that, but the key is to understand that and have a plan prior to getting too far into your overall transformation. One of the big advantages of cloud software is that updates to the software in enhancements in functionality and R&D innovations are automatically delivered to you. In most cases, you don't have to actually install the upgrades. The updates happen on their own, and you don't have to worry about getting behind on the advancements and the innovations that the vendors are making. That can be mostly good news, but in some cases, it can be bad news because now you don't have control. Whatever the software vendor decides they want to do with the software is what you're going to have to adapt and use within your business, which may or may not be a good thing depending on what the functionality is. We've had a lot of organizations that like what they got during the first pass of the implementation of the cloud software, but then over time, they find that some of the enhancements or the changes of the software actually diverged from what it is they wanted the software to do, but there wasn't a lot they could do about it, and they didn't have complete control over some of those enhancements. Now, some software vendors will let you opt in to enhancements or additions or extensions of the functionality, but a lot of the vendors don't. So you really need to understand what the process looks like for changes to the software, because it will and could affect your business longer term. So that lack of control that you once had with your on-prem systems that you owned and you could do whatever you wanted with, that lack of control goes away largely when you move to a cloud environment. When the whole cloud software category emerged a couple decades ago, one of the big selling points was that allegedly cloud software was going to save companies money. They didn't have to worry about investing in infrastructure, investing in people to maintain systems. They could outsource all of that to a cloud software provider who could presumably provide that same service for a lot lower cost because they're doing it at scale across so many different organizations. Well, that sounded good in theory. A lot of people bake that assumption into their business cases, but it turns out a couple decades later that is absolutely not true. If anything, organizations are spending a lot more on their cloud solutions now than they were spending on their on-premise systems 10 or 20 years ago. Now, in some cases, yes, some people are saving money with their cloud solutions, but for the most part, implementing a cloud solution is not necessarily to save money, or it shouldn't be. It could be that you want to deliver more business value to justify the increased cost that you're paying for the cloud software, but if a cloud software provider tells you they can deliver a certain functionality to you for less money than what you're getting today, I would be very skeptical of that and really challenge that assumption, because we find that more often than not, that assumption is simply not true. In fact, I used to argue with industry analysts and industry peers who were tied to certain cloud software vendors. I used to argue with them about whether or not clients actually save money, and we were saying from our point of view, clients are actually paying more, and they were saying, but they could be saving money if they deploy our solution, but yet we never saw that materialize in terms of real cost savings. So if you go into a cloud software implementation, just make sure you understand what you're really gonna pay, what the long-term costs are gonna be over time, and make sure you understand that you can justify those increased costs with increased value. Another challenge of cloud software is that it creates more of a vendor lock-in and data lock, meaning that now your vendor has more control over your applications, your business processes, and your data, and if you put all your eggs in one basket, that can give a lot of leverage to the software vendors. In fact, it can create an imbalance between the control you might want to have over your operations versus what the cloud provider can bring. Now, in addition to that, the switching costs are very high for cloud solutions. Switching costs for any sort of software change is high. It's always been high, it's always been risky, there's a lot of cost involved. But with cloud solutions, if you decide you want to move away from whatever cloud solution you're implementing now, that's going to be very difficult, a lot more difficult than it was perhaps moving from on-prem to another on-prem or moving on-prem to cloud. Now, getting the data and getting the same functionality from the system that you don't own anymore, it becomes more challenging. In the quest to create standard common business processes that can be scaled across multiple organizations, what cloud providers have unintentionally done is diluted competitive advantages of organizations that use the software. This is not their strategy, it's not by design. They're just trying to provide functionality at the best cost possible and provide it across as many organizations as possible, which is a noble goal. But you as an organization are probably trying to find ways that you can be competitive. How can you compete better with your peers? How can you be innovative? How can you provide better service to your customers? How can you provide a better employee experience? All those things are typically priorities for organizations that are more difficult to do in a cloud environment. And part of the reason for that is because what I had mentioned before, that the software works a standard way, and if every organization in your industry were using that same software with that same functionality, you have to ask yourself, well, what's our competitive advantage? Now, of course, when it comes to things like accounting, general ledger, accounts payable, maybe that's okay. Maybe you want to have standard processes and that's not your source of competitive advantage. But if you're a very unique manufacturer of some sort of unique product and unique make-to-order product, and you can respond very quickly to customer needs faster than your industry peers can, now how do you replicate that same competitive advantage in a way that others in your industry can't do? If all they have to do is implement the same software as you, then that doesn't really give you any sort of material competitive advantage. So it's important to recognize that cloud software can actually water down and dilute your competitive advantage, and that's why you have to think hard about where do I want to use cloud software, and where do I want to use maybe a different type of solution that gives me some sort of unique advantage. So this begs a question that some of you might think is crazy, and that is, will cloud solutions give way to the reemergence of on-premise solutions, given some of these limitations I've talked about? My answer to this would be probably not completely, but I do think that there's a pendulum swing that's happening too far, or swinging too far towards cloud solutions now. In the past, the pendulum was swinging far towards the on-premise solutions, and I think eventually we'll end up back in the middle somewhere. It may be that cloud solutions are good for more commodity-based business processes, and it may be that areas of competitive advantage continue to use on-premise solutions or find new ways to use different types of solutions other than traditional cloud software solutions. But I don't think cloud software will go away as a category overall. I think in the future, organizations will just have more options. So I'd love to hear what you think, though. Do you think these limitations are real with cloud solutions? Have you seen other limitations of cloud systems? I'd love to hear your feedback. And if you'd like to learn more about industry trends and independent reviews and rankings of different cloud solutions and non-cloud solutions in the space, please check out our annual digital transformation report. You can find that by scanning the QR code right here or go to the links below. So I hope you found this information useful and hope you have a great day.